Africa. 1.5 billion people in an area larger than the United States, China, Europe, and India combined. In the north, Islam continues its expansion and domination. To the south, Spiritism and ancestral worship of African traditional religion imprison hundreds of millions. Burgeoning cities are slowly seeing the rise of atheism and postmodernism. And all across the continent, the prosperity gospel deepens its lies and permeates everything religious that Africa does.
So many ills are spoken of across Africa. The orphan crisis, the AIDS crisis, political problems in countries. But the answer to that is the gospel.
There is a lack of clarity on what the gospel is and what it means to be a Christian. Coupled with that is the need for grounding in sound doctrine. There is a lack of depth both in those who teach and preach and in those who sit in the pews and listen.
The result has been this proliferation of unhealthy churches, dependent on outsiders to do the work or to support the work. And so that's the driving burden behind Central Africa Baptist University and Central Africa Seminary. The way that we are going to reach this continent with the gospel of Jesus Christ, it is through the local church. It is healthy churches led by equipped, passionate, spirit-filled men. Churches that plant churches that plant churches. That's God's method throughout the New Testament. It's not through a program or some NGO coming in with the next big idea or evangelistic crusades. It is doing the hard spade work of going into a community and proclaiming the gospel, believing that Christ will build his church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
Central Africa Baptist University is very intentional about going deep, changing the worldview, and producing a kind of man that answers to the needs in Africa.
As an institution, we've been producing graduates for 15 years now. 13 different countries on the continent, from north to south, faithfully serving in different capacities with a primary emphasis of living out the Great Commission.
Our core purpose is to train the next generation of servant leaders in Africa for Great Commission living. You know, each one of those words has a wealth of meaning. We will be producing men and women of honesty, obedience, wisdom, and service.
We insist on deep theological training so that when the scriptures are explained, God himself, by the Holy Spirit, will bring about conversion of souls, will bring about thriving churches that believe the gospel and preach the gospel. So really the impact is a vibrant church in Africa. That's what we want to see.
We have about 200 students here on our campus at present. But we also recognize that there are men out there in ministry who have never received any theological training. And so we're sending our faculty, we're sending our trained alumni to train them through our Theological Studies by Extension program. We host block classes for pastors in English here on our campus 3 times a year. And then as we've done this, we've recognized the need for resourcing these pastors. And now God has opened up an opportunity for us to open Imbila Publishers to publish and print affordable resources for the African church. God opened up an opportunity for us to put in a radio tower and a transmitter. And so our graduates who are pastoring churches, their sermons are going out in English and Bemba and Lamba, proclaiming this message. And so we thank God for what he is doing and the increased opportunities that he has given us to fulfill this mission.
The mission to train people for the church is a massive mission. This is a mammoth task. Central Africa Baptist University cannot do this task alone.
Paul in Romans spends a large chunk explaining the gospel, its its power and why it needs to be proclaimed. And at the end, in chapter 15, he then says to the Romans, the gospel is God's power for salvation. And you, as God's children, you must be committed to the gospel, and you must be committed to its proclamation and its advance. And therefore, you must partner with those who are committed to proclaiming the gospel.
We are looking for multiplication. We're looking for seeds to fall in the ground and die and produce fruit, and that fruit is multiplying itself. And that's what it's going to take to reach our world for Jesus Christ, and that's what it's going to take to reach the continent of Africa. So it's important what we do. Our biblical understanding, our biblical theology, our biblical philosophy matters, and that's what we're trying to impart into every student that comes through CABU.
Join us in shaping Africa's future through Christ-centered leadership. Whether you're called to ministry or just passionate about developing servant leaders, CABU welcomes you. Churches and believers across Africa and beyond can partner with us to equip the next generation of Great Commission leaders. Your journey or your support begins here at CABU.